I have a confession. I was painfully shy as a kid. I never spoke up. I never asked a question. I was always afraid to be put on the spot. And then I graduated, got myself a job as a management associate in a bank just after the great financial crisis. Pretty impressive, right? Well, one of the things they had us do was to attend a presentation module where we had to present in front of our peers, in front of the camera. You know where this is going. I had to introduce myself and tell a story. Pretty simple, right? Except at that time, you could only see the whites of my eyes. I was turning red from my face to my toes. I was shuffling on my feet and I was umming all over the place. I could literally feel the whole room cringe with me and their sigh of relief when it was over. And then the facilitator decided to play it all back on the big screen. As I watched myself in horror, I could feel my peers watching me watch myself. I tried to close my eyes, but it made it worse because I could hear all the nonstop. So all I could do was pray that it will be over and hopefully I would also disappear in the process. And that moment did not inspire me to be better. That moment only taught me one thing is that I do not deserve to speak on stage. So I kept quiet. Don't get me wrong. I was great one on one. I think I was pretty brilliant even, but if you put me in a room with more than two people and the pressure's on me, I freeze, I choke. I was ashamed of my own voice. And what this situation has taught me after I had years to process is that I am not alone. Every one of us has had one of these big screen moments. Maybe it was that time you said something in the room, that you said something in a meeting, and that made the entire room go quiet. And maybe it was that time where you put yourself out there and got rejected. Because what I realized is that because of this, we all started curating how we show up. We all started editing ourselves. And look at your social media. Everybody seems to be going on fantastic holidays. Everybody's making fabulous meals. Everybody's living the good life and launching something exciting. Nobody's talking about burning the pasta. Nobody's talking about crying inside the car park. Nobody's talking about struggling. And with AI, which by the way is fantastic, AI has made communication even more smoother, which I'm not so sure if it's a good thing because suddenly everybody sounds so eloquent on text, so polished on paper. We use AI to send our emails, our text messages, our posts on social media, and sometimes even how to write our keynotes. So, which leads me to wonder, who then are we talking to if we're using AI? And who can we trust? What and who can we trust? So there's this company called Edelman, and every year Edelman would survey 33,000 people across 28 countries. And they ask exactly the same thing. Who do you trust? And in 2025, the report shows that 7 out of 10 expect their leaders to lie to them. 7 out of 10 expect to be lied to. What is happening in this world? We are in a trust recession. We don't trust, which used to come from top down, from the leaders above to the folks on the ground, has suddenly collapsed into something lateral. We only trust our peers. We only trust people who are like us. But then, in this world of filtered reels and AI generated everything, who can we trust anymore? Who can we see that is like ourselves? Because trust isn't built on perfection. Trust is built on truth. And truth, as we all know, is imperfect. So, back to my story. Fast forward a few years after my banking job, I decided to quit and travel across the world. I went on a sabbatical. That is what we call a mid career crisis with a bank balance. So, I was in San Francisco watching a stand up comedy show, and there was this female comic. She wasn't that funny. So I started heckling her from the audience, and I was getting more laughs than she did. So I thought, well, if this is the bar for comedy, then maybe I'll just do comedy. After all, I'm prettier and I'm funnier. And so with that, I went to Google and started Googling comedy New York City. And I found three options: stand up, storytelling, and improv. Stand up and storytelling sounds like a lot of work. And I wasn't in the mood to work. So I decided to sign up for improv without knowing what it was. Because after all you have to do is show up. Expectations are low. But it turns out improv was extremely uncomfortable. I was put on the spot on a regular basis. But I kind of got the hang of it because I realized everybody there in the room was just like me, doing their best, struggling just like me, and failing just like me. So I figured we were all suffering in improv together, growing and learning together. And then we had to do a class showcase, a show in front of other people, in front of a lot of other people. And the night of the show, I started freaking out that my coach pulled me aside and said to me, Anna, stop seeing the audience as your enemy. See them as people who you allow to witness you have fun with your team. And that reframe changed everything for me. That gave me the courage to agree to go up on stage. And then he says, and there is a certain magic that happens at improv when you've been working with a team for so long. And that is like, your body sometimes moves before your brain can think. And when that happens, don't let your brain stop you. Just go with it. And so, with that in mind, I decided to go ahead. And the night of the show, we were doing a format called the Armando, where someone tells a personal story and the rest of the team does improv scenes inspired by the stories. We did our first set, and then there was silence. Everybody was just staring at each other, wondering, who's going to go next? Suddenly, I feel myself moving towards center stage. Before my brain could even stop me, I opened my mouth and out came a story. A story of how I went backpacking across the jungles of Colombia with my Samsonite four-wheel carry-on because I thought hostels were hotels with a typo. I got a few laughs from the audience. And as I was telling the story of how I was clinging on the back of a motorbike, going up the side of a mountain in the pouring rain with my suitcase in the middle of the handlebars, I started to understand. The audience wasn't there to judge me. They were there to feel what I feel. And that night, after my show, my friend pulled one of my teammates pulled me out and said to me like, hey, one of my friends came to watch the show and she never laughs at anything, but she was laughing so hard at your set. And then that's when I knew I wanted to help others find that feeling. So in Singapore, I started What's Your Story Slam, Singapore's largest live storytelling show. I chose to make it live on purpose because I want people to feel what it's like to be in a room full of strangers and have one person, an ordinary person just like you and me, sharing their story as moment in their life. And over the past 6 years, I bear witness to the magic that happens on stage when one person chooses to show up as who they are in front of a room of strangers where nobody feels alone. There was this time when a dad tells a story about going through Singapore immigration without his shirt on, just a backpack, because he gave his shirt to his daughter who threw up all over her dress. And then there was a guy who told a story about making that long drive from Frankfurt to Paris every weekend just to see a girl and getting up the courage to finally tell her how he feels, only to be disappointed and realize that his feelings were not reciprocated. And just like that, they share stories that the endings were a little messy, no Hollywood happy ending, and that shows that life is flawed, funny, and sad all at the same time. Now, I'm going to talk to you about something that we don't often talk about, and that is the difference between vulnerability and trauma dumping. Because one, the way I see it, one creates a connection in the room and brings the room together, whereas the other creates a distance. It's like the difference between a scar and a wound. So a scar is like hardened skin. It's tougher than your regular skin. It shows I went through battle and I survived and I have a story to tell. Whereas a wound is pretty fragile. Sometimes it's fresh. It just probably stopped bleeding. It hasn't completely healed yet. It can still be ripped open. That's what we call trauma. And in this, what I want people to know is that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay for us to share our scars, but not necessarily our trauma. So, a few years ago, a lady came up to me and says she has a story to tell at my show. So, as she was pitching the story, a story about being sexually harassed in the workplace, I felt this is a powerful story. This is an important story. But as she tells me the story, she keeps crying. She can't even go through it. So I had to ask her, is this a scar or a wound? And she says, it's a wound. So I say, then your story is not ready. Once, while storytelling can be therapeutic, it cannot replace therapy. So until your wound turns into a scar, you can't tell that story because that's my number one rule at the show. You, as a storyteller, you're allowed to let the audience feel the weight of your burden, but you have to take it back with you. You can't dump it on them because it's not their job to carry your burden for you. So the lady did come back to me, but she told a different story. So whether she dealt with her trauma, I don't know because that's not my story to tell. If she shoved it under the couch like we mostly do, it probably is more or less the likely case. But it is not my job to tell her story, neither is it the audience job to process it. So, one more thing. So, a story is not a series of events, like some people have that definition. A story is not you got up, you made coffee, you came to see a TED talk, you sat down. That's not a story. That's called a schedule. A story needs change. No change, no story. A change is like the scar. The scar is a change. The scar is the insight. The scar is what makes the story worth telling. The scar, the, it's the story that you tell when you refer to your scar that reminds yourself, I went through something tough, and yet I'm still here to tell it. So You all have been there, you all have been in those rooms, those boardrooms, those meetings, those offsite where everyone's performing competence, everyone's performing confidence, everyone's performing that they got it all together, and where nobody really trusts anybody. So here's one thing I'd like you to do. I'd like you to do the next time, not someday, but later today. Okay. And that is at the next meeting you're in, or at the next coffee you're in, or when you're trying to impress someone, share something real. Share, share your story, not just a destination, but share your journey, share your scars. I'm not asking you to overshare because there's a line. And the line is this: you can share your scars in your areas of expertise as long as you've already crossed the other side. So, for example, you're in a meeting with a client who's pretty nervous about their rebranding. And so, what you can share is that, hey, my first rebrand was a disaster. We had to go back to the drawing board a few times, but until we finally got it right. And that's why I feel I'm good at what I'm doing today. That's a scar that you can share that shows that you're both human and you're relatable as well as credible. But what you cannot share is in that same meeting is say, yeah, I honestly I have no idea what I'm doing, but thank you for giving me a chance. Now that's a wound and that belongs in totally different conversation. But if it's not your area of expertise, the rules are different. You can share anything. That burning pasta story pretty much works every time, can connect with anyone, except probably if you're a chef, you know? So, but in that time where you totally misjudge a situation, share it. It's gold. Because at the end of the day, stories are how we as humans have built trust long before we had the words to define it. And stories are what connects us to one another. Stories are what makes us human and what makes us real. And in the age of filtered reels and AI generated everything, the most radical thing you can do right now is just to show up as yourself and share your scars, not your wounds. Thank you.